Greetings, everybody. I want to welcome you to episode 33 of Compass Games Live. My name is John Kranz, and today we're going to be introducing a special guest, Brian Train, for one of our upcoming releases, which actually you'll see right above me here, Brief Border Wars. So that's going to be our feature attraction for tonight, and we'll probably have a bit of a shorter episode today because Brian's going to be our only guest for tonight, and I just have a few housekeeping things to cover. So just a reminder for those joining us on Facebook Live and on YouTube Live, thanks for being here. It's great to have you, and we met just a week ago when we had Ty Bomba on with Bill Thomas, owner and president of Compass Games. So got a lot of good feedback with that session. I hope you're going to also, I know you're going to enjoy this session as well, because we're going to be getting into our upcoming release, Brief Border Wars, which we've got a lot of questions on as we get closer to release. So just a few things to cover really quickly is our schedule coming up. The big news is that we released Decision at Kasserine. So people have started receiving the game just a few days ago. And, you know, so far the initial impressions about the packaging, the maps, the counters, you know, overall quality, we're really happy to see that. I saw one comment on Facebook, I think it was Facebook, yeah. They said they read the rules online and they said, oh, I actually understand these rules after one pass. They're really digestible, so maybe I'll consider buying it. So really great to see that feedback. And again, the rules are available online for Decision at Kasserine. So we just released that last week. If you're not familiar with Decision at Kasserine, it was a original release from 3W magazine in the early 80s, I believe. And it became a boxed edition. And later it was also published by Hobby Japan. And that covers pretty much stayed constant for Decision at Kasserine that you see there. So we actually copied it and actually worked with the Bundesarchiv in Germany to get the licensing rights for the cover because we didn't want to lose that cover because it's such a well-known cover for the game. So again, we're really pleased to be shipping that game out now. And again, looking forward to getting feedback about that game. So as far as the release schedule, again, that's our most recent release. We announced last episode, we had some new items we added to the pre-order list, which were the second printings for some new reprints. So I won't get into those details now, but if you go to the Compass homepage, you'll see under those 4 items that are our most recent pre-order items, those are all going to be second printings of games. There's 4 of them. So again, please check out the website. Our schedule since last week has not changed, so there's no update to give you. Next up for release this month actually is going to be Brief Border Wars, so we're going to be spending a lot of time on that. And then we have Brotherhood and Unity. So actually right above me, you can probably see the partial cover of Brotherhood and Unity. A lot of people have been looking forward to that release, and that's going to be coming out in June as well. And also we have Paper Wars 85 Hannibal. And so that will be our next Paper Wars issue. So all those 3 items are for this month, June. So pretty busy June coming up. And then for next month, for July, we have 3 items scheduled. We have Dawn's Early Light, CNC Tricorn Jacobite Rising, and The Korean War by Joe Bukowski. So I did want to mention some things quickly, just as far as those list of items, and again, they're on our website, is we have Tricorn Jacobite Rising is still available today as part of our Kickstarter. So I'm going to go ahead and I just want to show that just briefly to you, just so you're aware of it. So I'm going to bring in my screen here. And again, bringing up the Kickstarter page. I want to thank you because we've had a really good response. We use, just so you know, we use Kickstarter, not in the traditional sense, as far as a lot of publishers will use it with add-ons and goals, targets and goals for add-ons, different levels and tiers. We see Kickstarter as another marketing vehicle to help us for certain titles that we consider to be good crossover games, a combination, between war game, towards the Euro game, going towards the Euro game crowd. So these will be all the games we have with mounted maps, etc. They might not be the traditional hex-based war game, for example. So we've had games on there like World War II Commander, Battle of the Bulge, Dawn's Early Light, for example, and then of course now Jacobite Rising. So Jacobite Rising's done quite well with quite a few backers. And again, if you pre-ordered it on our website, you're already all set. You don't have to worry about any type of a pledge if you actually pre-ordered through Compass's site directly. So this is going to be a module that you want. You're going to need Tricorn American Revolution. So again, this is actually a standalone game rather. So to be clear, what's nice about this is it's a standalone game. You don't need the American Revolution if you don't own it. I was getting confused for a second because I know we have we have the Combat 2 game coming, and that one does require the original Combat. You need both games together, but for Jacobite Rising, this really is just a plain standalone game by itself. Don't have to have the American Revolution title. So again, please check out the Kickstarter. It's got 2 weeks or 14 days left to go, but we appreciate the support. And again, we're looking forward to releasing that game very soon. Other things I want to mention as well quickly is we have our Compass Games Expo. Yes, we're launched, have gone live. We've also got people already registered for it. So we're updating the site. We've got 13 attendees already registered, and we've got the game signups listed as well. So it's a new venue that we have for this event, Comfort Inn and Suites. And this is not like your typical Comfort Inn and Suites. It's not like the hotel. This is actually more of a banquet space type hotel. So if you can see from the photos there on the website, it's actually got a really nice ballroom setup. It also has additional space. So for the first time this year, we're going to be doing some seminars. So we'll do, for example, a Compass Games update being the sponsor. And then we'll have some designers also available, and they'll be doing some brief sessions as well as far as works in progress or any game series, etc. So if you haven't had a chance to make it to Compass Games Expo, I think the most compelling reason I would say to come is you can expect to get 50% off all Compass products pretty much. And Bill even mentioned he might go with deeper discounts for this year because we did the special we had that big special sale while people were doing social distancing for the past 2 months. So people always rave about being able to pick up so much product at such a great price. It's our way to say thank you for your support for those that can be there. So again, that's a little bit about Compass Expo 2020. You'll see it from the website. Just hit Expo 2020 link and you'll be all set. And finally, Paper Wars is worth mentioning because we're going to be entering into a new subscription fairly soon. We have issue 95 coming out shortly, and then it's going to be 96, but we are taking subscriptions now for issues 97 through 100. And actually, issue 97 will be the first issue where Ty Bomba, editor of Paper Wars, that will be his first full issue. And this sort of represents the transition of Paper Wars into a Compass Games in-house magazine, fully supporting Compass Games products, etc. So, and Ty did talk about that. If you check out our episode 32 last week on our YouTube channel, you can listen to what Ty had to say about that transition and what you can expect from the magazine. So again, I hope that information is helpful to you. And I'm going to stop my screen sharing just for one moment, just to pause for a moment. And I want to mention we had over here War and Pieces live. So I want to give a shout out to Rob Orm for War and Pieces live. So really appreciate that was an opportunity for Bill Thomas to be on with him. Last week was the broadcast. We tried to post on social media to let everybody know that we were featured a special guest on War and Pieces live. And you can find that on YouTube. Just do a search for War and Pieces and Compass Games, and that will take you right to that episode. And also, I want to give a hat tip to Dan Picaldi. He actually approached us about having the opportunity to be a featured guest on that show with Rob. So thanks, Rob. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to allowing us or allowing Bill to speak on behalf of his company, Compass Games, and talk about Compass, where we're going. And Bill answered a ton of questions last week. So please do check out War and Pieces if you can on YouTube. And with that, I think we're going to move on to our featured guest. So again, really excited to get right into it. So as I mentioned, we're talking about brief border wars, right? So let's go ahead and do this properly. So I just want to welcome Brian Train to our episode. And Brian, are you there? Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Can I
speak? There you are.
Too? Am I unmuted? All right.
You're unmuted. There you go. I had you hidden. So and probably that's a good thing because you would have been going crazy listening to me for the last 5 minutes trying to cover our schedule and our last episodes and Expo and everything. So I always try to get some housekeeping out of the way, some quick updates out of the way. But now we're going to get to the meat of it. So I know we got to...
It's okay. My parents always said I should be neither heard nor seen. So.
Oh, well, I'm afraid that plan's going to change now. So what I want to do is let's start with some good introduction here. So what I would like to do is just if you could introduce yourself to everybody in case they have not come across your many, many titles that you've published. Just give a little background, maybe where you're based out of and what you do typically, day to day, 9 to 5, etc., 8 to 6, whatever it happens to be. Just maybe a little background about your personal life.
Sure. Okay. Well, probably a lot of the people tuning in may not have met me in person, but they've heard my name. So I'm Brian Train. I live in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, way out on the left coast. I've been designing and publishing games for about 25 years, almost 30 years now. I've done all kinds of stuff from, very basic desktop publishing stuff to a couple of titles by GMT, which is right now pretty well up there in terms of production quality. Oh, and Compass Games, of course, they're very high in production quality. Mark, I hope I'm allowed to mention other companies' products. And
yes, of course you are. Yeah, okay, this is a free airway here. So yeah. Not a problem at all. Yeah, not a problem at all. Don't worry. Absolutely.
Yeah. So as I said, I've been designing for a while. I guess I've got about 50 titles that I've published in one way or another over the last, 25 or 30 years, and with all kinds of different companies. And I like to people who know my work, they know I like to treat unusual subjects. And this is one thing we're going to be talking about, a set of 4 unusual subjects in
Yeah.
tackled in kind of an old way, but we're kind of making the old thing new again, perhaps. Maybe that's one way to talk about this quad.
Right. And speaking of the old way, I want to go back to the old days, and I want you to share with everybody, what was your first published game design, and what can you recall? What can you recall about that experience? Your first published game, what was it? How did it come into being? Give us the whole story about that.
Well, I guess the very first couple of games that I published that weren't, something I did myself and copied for somebody else would be with the microgame co-op. It was called the microgame co-op back when Kerry Anderson and I started it in 1994, 1995. After a few years, we had to change the name of the group to Microgame Design Group instead of Microgame Co-op, because Kerry lives at the time he lived in Alberta. Mm-hmm. And in Alberta, the provincial government thinks co-op refers to agricultural and economic co-ops. So one day, the Alberta provincial government wrote to Kerry saying, listen, if you're going to call yourself a co-op, you're going to have to get a board of directors and some bylaws and grow some wheat or something like that. So we decided to change it to Microgame Design Group instead. But Kerry and I started this thing in 1994, 1995. And it went on for about 10 years and more. And this was a game publishing company that was non-profit by intention and not by outcome. Because what we did was we put together DTP quality games, color laser printed counters on a sheet, and a map that was no bigger than 11 by 17, and a set of, a fairly short set of rules. And we would put them in a comic book bag, and we would sell it for about the cost to produce it and mail it somewhere. And so that was how we wanted to do it. It was a vehicle for amateur game designers to just kind of get their product out there, to get their ideas out there. And we turned out about 40 titles in about 10 years.
Oh,
so
great.
Yeah, it was a really great start. And of course, as well as I do, there's nothing like seeing something that you've worked on, a book you've written, an article you've written, a game that you've put together, finally being produced by somebody else, and then they send you a copy. So
what put you in designer mode? Did you start doing development, or were you writing articles about games? Was there any type of a ramp towards becoming a designer? Like how did that come into being? That's the route you decided to take? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, I started playing war games in about 1978. I was about 15 years old. My favorite uncle sent me a copy of Tactics 2 for Christmas. I think it took a long time for my parents to forgive him. I'm not sure they ever actually did. And from the very beginning, when I started to pick up games, I picked up a few SPI games, the old Meta Gaming micro games that were in the little plastic envelopes and stuff. From the very beginning, I was interested in making variants and covering the kind of topics that I was interested in that nobody else was publishing on. And even by, after a couple of years, I had put together a game of by myself, a complete game on Busan Perimeter, which is like an early stage in the Korean War. And that was like about 1981, 80 or 81. And I didn't publish it, of course, but I did come back and publish something like it quite a while later. So from the beginning, I was playing, but I was also making variants. And then
variants. That's okay.
That's right. Yep. Everybody falls in through variants. I'm sure. Well, I haven't seen the interview that you had with Ty last week, because my internet has been really laggy at home for some reason. I couldn't get the video to run. But people who have been in the hobby for a while will recall that Ty was writing variant articles and criticism and that kind of thing in the gaming magazines all the way back into the early and mid 70s. Because I think he's about maybe 10 years older than I am. I think he's about 65 or so. Mm-hmm. So he's been in there for a long time. And of course, a lot of designers start out as makers of variants, and then you kind of fall into writing about it, and then eventually you'll design your own games, and then eventually you'll publish them as well.
Right. Now, what I want to interject here quickly is because I do want to get to brief border wars. So let's sort of gently start moving there. And the way I want to get there is let's talk about what else you've done with Compass. My understanding is that Brief Border Wars is not your first published title with Compass, but you did one other title before that. Could you share with everybody what that game is, and yeah, any comments about the design? That'd be great.
That's right.
Oh.
It was.
Yeah. See, I was right. See, I was right about it was one other game, but now
Yes.
you got to fill in the blanks for everybody. What was it?
I'm being cryptic now.
I know.
No, well, the one other game I had, my other title with Compass Games is Finnish Civil War, which was in Paper Wars. It came out in January, a year or two back, and that was a sort of a family of games that I designed on wars that were done between World War I and World War II. So there's kind of a family of those games, and Finnish Civil War was one of them. The others are things like Warplan Crimson, which was a fictional hypothetical invasion of Canada by the United States in the late 1930s. And Freikorps and Konarmia, which were two games on the Russo-Polish War, and then figuring that the Soviets had won the Russo-Polish War and kept on going into Germany. Anyway, Finnish Civil War was one of those games using that system. I originally designed it in 2010 and put it up on my webpage for free print and play, the way I've done with a number of my titles. And Bill saw it, Bill or Ken saw it in about 2012 and thought that it would be a good one for Paper Wars. So we started talking about that back in 2012, but Paper Wars took a while to shift tracks as well. And now, of course, as you remarked, it's something that's a really high quality magazine that's producing regularly, and it's now like a house organ for Compass Games products, which is great. So I was quite pleased when it came out. It looked really nice, and I haven't had too much feedback on the game itself. But people seemed to find it interesting at the time. I do remember long ago when I was playtesting it with somebody in Vancouver at Rob Bottos' convention, BottosCon, and someone came along and said, "What the hell's this?" And I said, "Well, it's the Finnish Civil War in 1918." And he looked at me and said, "Well, geez, now I've seen everything."
That's good. That's an obscure topic, and I think actually that might generate more interest in the title now that they know you designed it. I think people will leave this broadcast and probably go back. If they have that issue again, it's just 2 years ago, like you said. They'll be able to pull it out. So that's really great. Now, I warned you in advance that I'm going to put some undue pressure on you through the audience, through this great relationship we have with our live audience. We always love getting some tough questions or all kinds of questions for our guests. That's just the way we like to keep things fresh. So what I'd like to do is give you the first question from Nathaniel Robinson. So he's asking here, he notices, like many others, that you are designing these games around obscure topics. So do you experience any apprehension that your games won't appeal to the traditional wargaming hex-based crowd? I'd put it.
Apprehension. That's an interesting word to use, Nathaniel, and thank you for the question. I'm not really apprehensive at all because I don't design anything. I don't do anything unless I really want to. This is not a job for me. It's a hobby that, which after a long period of time of design and work might pay for itself in a good year. And I don't count on having too many good years. So I rarely, if ever, undertake a topic with the thought, are people going to want to buy this? Are people going to want to look at this? Very selfishly, I design for what I'm interested in first. And there are people out there who don't really care about the Finnish Civil War that El Salvador and Honduras fought a war in 1969 or anything like that. Wargamers tend to have, they tend to have favorite periods, historical periods, or treatments of historical periods. And outside of that, everybody's allowed to have favorites. So people who like the kind of topics that I do, they don't like everything I do. because I've done, most of my work has been 20th century or 21st century stuff. And there are people who, really don't make a habit of playing anything after 1900, which is fine. I'm not going to be universally, palatable to everybody. And the way that I treat topics, sometimes the systems I use, they're not always traditionalist either. Sometimes they're not all that easy to get into. And again,
Yep.
That's I design in a way that that pleases me. I'm sorry if it sounds selfish or boastful or bad somehow.
Hey, it's your time, and like you said, it's your passion. You should be doing what you're passionate about, right? You don't have to
That's
apologize for that.
Yeah, and
So
I don't.
go
And
ahead.
I
Yeah.
don't do it for money. I don't do it for notoriety. If I want to be happy with what I do, and whether I sell a dozen copies of it myself through my website, just DTP one at a time, or whether it's turned out in thousands of copies through a magazine or something like that, it's not all one to me. But
Right.
I feel I have to be happy with what I'm doing, and I have to be happy with the topic to do my
Ab-
best work on it.
Right, absolutely. And then just a shout out to your website. I want to make sure everybody's aware, and I'll add your website to the YouTube. We'll have this as a recorded session on our YouTube channel, and I'll make sure in the description I'll have a separate link to your website. But just so everybody can see here, your website's pretty easy to get to. It's just brtrain.wordpress.com. Just type that in. Anybody can go there now in their browser window. Although please stay with us. Don't lose us to another browser tab. Stay in our tab if you could. Stay within our zone of control here in our browser tab. But yes, brtrainwordpress.com. Again, I will add that to the recording just so everybody is aware. So, and I believe I had just one more question because I do want to get, I do want to get to, the topic at hand for today. But let's do one more before we get to the game. And that is from Dan from No Enemies Here. Dan asks, so why did you settle on obscure topics? And then personal question, why Vancouver? How did you end up in Vancouver? And how's that going? So good question, Dan.
Sorry, Dan. Actually, I live in Victoria, British Columbia, which is on Vancouver Island, but it's about an hour and a half ferry boat ride away from Vancouver, the city. I've lived in Victoria for most of my life, actually. My dad was a Mountie. How stereotypical is that in Canadian? So I was born on one edge of Canada, and I've lived or passed through all the provinces. But when I was 12, he was transferred out here to Victoria, and I've lived here off and on ever since. It's really nice. This is probably the nicest part of Canada to live in. The climate is not too hot, not too cold. Most of the time I forget that I live on an island, except when I try to leave it. But I don't.
Dan's also asking you why obscure topics being your focus. Can you share some more about that?
From the very beginning, the reason why I got into designing was that nobody or very, very few people were designing games on the topics that I wanted to see stuff about. I started in the late 70s and early 80s, for example. I was interested in contemporary wars. Back then, it was things like Vietnam and the Falklands. And it would be years before anybody did any kind of a Falklands game for that very short war. And as far as Vietnam goes, that was an interesting conflict, but hardly anybody had done anything on it. And so I was wondering, why aren't people doing stuff on contemporary things? Why aren't they doing these more challenging topics? Why is it always another Waterloo, another Gettysburg, another Bulge? Although I should talk, because, even I have done a Bulge game.
Even you have done a Bulge game. Well, let's talk about another game you've done that's going to be coming out here in a matter of days. That's our first scheduled release for June out of 3 titles. So that gives you an idea how soon this one should be coming out. So Brief Border Wars is a quad game, and I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong. It's based on a shared system. So there's basically a system rules, much like the SPI quad. So I'll just throw out one, Army Group South or Modern Battles quad, you name it. Basically, you've got a set of system rules, which are like 4 pages long only. And then you've got the dedicated rules for all 4 of these different engagements, which are, I think, no more than 4 pages because you've got designer notes also in each one, etc. So again, Brief Border Wars, while I'm showing this title, could you give us just a high-level overview of the 4 battles, or the 4 wars, border wars, and why you pick these 4? I think that is going to interest a lot of people. So spend what time you want on that.
Yeah, sir, no problem. So I love the old SPI quads, and as you can see by the cover design, I browbeat the artist Mark Mahaffey into putting something together that looked like the old SPI quads. This is a little different in that there's a fairly simple system of core rules, and you have the four games that each have exclusive rules that embellish the core rules. So the 4 battles, or 4 conflicts that we've got, are El Salvador and Honduras, 1969. That's called the Soccer War. The Turkish invasion of Cyprus in 1974. The Third Indochina War between China and Vietnam in 1979. And finally, the Second Lebanon War in 2006. So these were the 4 that I chose out of a lot of topics that I was thinking about at the time. And the criteria that I applied were that, first of all, the conflict should be really short. So like a matter of days and weeks, as opposed to months or years. So, for example, the 1969 football war between El Salvador and Honduras is one of the shortest wars in history. It was about 100 hours.
100 hours.
100
okay.
hours. Yeah. It was about 100 hours before the Organization of American States stepped in and enforced a ceasefire. So very short, and the longest of them would probably be the Third Indochina War, which is about 3 weeks to a month. It's around that time.
True to its title, brief border wars. True to its title.
Absolutely. So they had to be short. There had to be a definite beginning and end to the fighting. So in 3 cases, the fighting is ended by some kind of a UN established ceasefire, something like that. And in 1979, for example, the Chinese they turned in, they turned in a pretty bad performance in northern Vietnam, and then they said, "Okay, well, we've taught you your lesson, then we'll leave." So a definite. So first of all, very short, beginning and end, definite beginning and end to the fighting. The fighting had to be constrained physically or politically in some way. So it was restrained to like a particular section of the border, or there were certain political constraints, so that one side or the other couldn't go all out. So there's those particular criteria in the game as well. And then finally, that at the end of the war, that you have pretty much, the status quo that you had before, or some kind of a stable end state. So with the Soccer War, the border ended up pretty much exactly as it was in the beginning. With Cyprus, it ended with a stable situation that with a green line that was imposed by the UN, but the Turks were in possession of, like the north 40% of Cyprus. And with the Second Lebanon War, of course, there were no adjustments to the border, but Hezbollah got smacked down and stayed quiet for the next few years.
And again, just to provide people more information, again, I have here an example. This is the back of the box, obviously. So you can see that now on the website. We added that earlier today. So obviously we've had the front cover for the game, but today we went ahead and added, so you can get more information about those 4 battles, everyone. If you've got the game coming to you soon, or you want to find out more, please check out our product page. Here you can see you'll have more information about the game. And yeah, it's meant to be really quick playing. I think there was even a comment that it could be played over a long lunch, maybe 2 hours or less. Is that an accurate statement, Brian, that it could be?
Yeah, I think so. Once people understand the system, which is card driven, and it's fairly simple, and the game bumps along. Each game is 7 turns long, and that's dictated by the number of cards in the game that drive the action. So once you're familiar with it, or you played the games a couple of times, once you got an idea of what it is that you want to do, it wouldn't take you very long to play it, an hour and a half or 2.
Right. It's one counter sheet only for all 4 games. So it's meant to really be a nice, I don't want to call it a pocket game, but it's not even a Series 120, but it's really meant to have a small footprint. Very, very much a departure from, say, coin series styles games that go much deeper, much longer to play, multiplayer, etc. This is more of a quick get into it, try something unique battle.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to do with this quad, was to have a fairly simple system that handled these conflicts. And I've mentioned these criteria, but of course, I also like to have a lot of asymmetry and chaos in my games. So one other note about these games is that the mechanics themselves in the system give you a lot of asymmetry between the two forces, and there's a lot of chaos. You have to do a lot of improvising. So there are no perfect plans in these games. And that's as it was historically, because none of the forces involved were very good at what it was they were doing. There were political factors in play, and just professional factors in play that made things kind of stop and start and rather chaotic in what happened. And I've always wanted to show these kinds of asymmetries and how chaos and friction intrudes in people's perfect plans.
Great. And then what I'm doing here is I'm showing all four maps, and just so everybody understands, these are 17 by 22 inch maps. Think again to the standard SPI quad. So these maps here, this is just the master art file. So they've all been cut into separate map pieces. So obviously it's going to take up not much table space to, play whatever game you're playing. It's going to be just the one. But again, just want to share with everybody again, this is not yet posted to the website. This would be something I should be adding to the website. But again, an exclusive for you. You can see all four maps here. What I'm not showing right now is, maybe you can explain, Brian, to everybody. There is some card play in the game, so which is a nice touch. So can you maybe touch upon how the card play will work in your system?
Sure thing. There's actually 5 games in this system. The first one was a game called The Little War, which came out as an addendum to the Ukrainian crisis game that I did in 2014, 2015, that was published by Hollandspiel. And this was pretty much the same kind of game as the same system, except it used a deck of ordinary playing cards to drive the action. And how it worked is, there's 54 cards in a deck of playing cards. There's 52 playing cards and 2 jokers, right? So 54 of those. And the idea I had was that the 2 players would play a game, and the entire deck of cards would be played through in the course of that game. So each side had the face cards were sort of special cards, where they could do things like refit or realignment or recover for their forces, that kind of thing. And they could be played discretion at the player's discretion. And then one side would have the red cards and the other side would have the black cards. And for the red side, the hearts would be movement, relating to movement, and the diamonds would be relating to combat. And for the black player, the 2 suits would do the same. And finally, the 2 jokers would be random events. So what you would do is you would shuffle the cards, and in each turn of the game, you would deal out 6 cards to each player. Now, so one player would get the red cards, the other one would get the black cards. And so sometimes you'd end up with there'd be 3 red and 3 black, or 4 and 2, or once in a great while 6 and 0, which was unusual. But it could happen, but it doesn't matter if if it does, because you'd get a good chance of getting all 6 later on. Anyway, the idea is that each turn you get a hand of cards, and you have to do a bit of improvisation as to how much moving or how much fighting you're going to do. So that was the trick with the original game, The Little War. And the biggest change in moving from that game to this quad is that instead of a deck of ordinary playing cards, although the game is perfectly playable with a deck of ordinary playing cards, instead we have these special cards, which is where each card has 2 values. So it has a movement value and a combat value. And the movement value is how many units you can move. The combat value is how many units you can use to fight. And none of them are even. So you'll get a card with a high movement value, but a correspondingly low combat value. So you're never stuck completely in that you can only move but not fight, or only fight but not move. But the kind of efficiency that your war machine has is going to vary an awful lot from one turn to the next.
Okay, yeah. And then you mentioned earlier, so this Brief Border Wars is not, if I understand correctly, this is not a brand new design in terms of concepts and mechanics that you've come up with. I think you just mentioned earlier, you showed that game. So I think this system here, although this is packaged differently, like with the custom cards and things like that, this system, can you talk about where this system came from, what that previous title was again? You know, the evolution of what got us here to Brief Border Wars?
Sure. I mean, the Little War was, well, you know, one day we were horsing around on Consum World, and somebody was talking about why didn't somebody ever do a game about the Teschen War of 1919, and which was a fight between Czechoslovakia and Poland, I think, in 1919 over a very small part, the town of Teschen, between those two countries. So, you know, people were just batting back and forth these sort of obscure conflicts, and I thought, oh, well, why don't I do something on that? That's pretty obscure. And then I looked at it and I thought, that's not so interesting. And then I discovered that in March of 1939, Hungary and Slovakia fought a war for about 1 week. And so I thought, okay, I need to. This looks like an interesting topic, because it was 1 week long. Neither side was particularly good at fighting, and neither one was particularly organized, because Czechoslovakia was falling apart at the time because it was being occupied by the Nazis. Meanwhile, Hungary had these territorial ambitions, so they wanted to snap off a corner of eastern Slovakia for themselves. So improvised forces on both sides, fighting in a very improvised way, a very definite period of 1 week of fighting before the Germans intervened and shut it down. And I thought, okay, I've got these restrictions in place, and I was kind of interested in the idea of using a deck of cards to drive the action. And I see that someone has made a comment about Paul Rohrbaugh and the way he has used a standard deck of cards in his in many of his games. This was not inspired by that. This was something, I was working on this back in, like, I don't know, 2014 or 2015, so a few years ago, and I didn't own any of Paul's games at the time that happened to use this system. What kind of inspired me was actually, I'd run across a couple of miniatures rules systems, which some miniatures rule systems use a standard deck of playing cards as a way of generating random events or reactions to units when they meet on the table and that kind of thing. I always like looking at miniatures rule systems, because sometimes there's some really interesting ideas in there that are quite applicable to a map and counter kind of game. And that was my original inspiration for that. Right. So Paul doesn't need to take offense or
there we go,
or feel flattered either way. It's, you know.
Yeah, that's great. So actually, we had a few more questions. I'm going to actually open it up to. I want to thank everybody for joining us again tonight on YouTube and Facebook Live. It's great to have a live audience and makes things very lively. So there's a few questions I'm going to go through here. Mostly, of course, are going to be for you. I'll take just the first one here. So Kev Sharp is asking how many copies will be available. So just in the true spirit of Brief Border Wars, we're doing a brief product sale. So you only have 5 days to order this game, and then it's gone. So it's brief. It's going to be a brief publication. You only get 5 days to buy it, and then that's it. We're done. So,
well, who gets all the unsold copies?
Yeah, well, we're going to just sell out in 5 days, right? That's the plan. So no, seriously, obviously we'll, we have probably 4 digits behind this. Usually Compass Print Run. I don't get into too many details, but we don't look for a pre-order number to hit. We do the commitment to publish, and then whatever pre-orders come in, that's great. And if we get a lot of pre-orders, maybe that helps us decide what how much to do in inventory. But the main point is you've got 5 days to buy it before it's all gone. So that's my official answer. I'm going to go with that as my official answer. Hopefully Kev will accept that, right, Kev? And you'll buy it within 5 days. So let's move on to some other questions here for you. From Mo's Gaming Table, Mo wants to know what's the strangest conflict that you've ever wanted to do a game on but haven't done it yet.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
That's a good question, and I don't have a good answer.
You better think of one. I mean, we're gonna have to cut the broadcast here. We're gonna think on your toes here. You've done one game. You told me you did a design in 48 hours before. You've done a full. If you can do a full design in 48 hours, you can answer Mo's question about what's a unique battle out there that you haven't done yet that you think would be interesting.
Yeah. This was my 48-hour design. This Ukrainian crisis game, I put it together in 48 hours over the very weekend of the Crimean referendum, when it looked like the Soviets were going to do something overt. But there have been so many strange conflicts over the years. Mm-hmm. And I'm always thinking of topics, but which one would be the most standout, weirdest one that I would also want to do something about? I don't know. I like unusual topics. Unusual topics don't always lend themselves to good games or interesting treatments, though, either. So I haven't done everything out there.
Yeah, that's true. I get the point that maybe some situations don't lend themselves, or they're even more challenging to get on the tabletop. So what I want to do now, since you've done such a compelling job talking about Brief Border Wars, and I think you've got everybody excited about a game that's going to be shipping shortly. So great job on that, and great background about your background with, obscure battles. People know a lot more about you now, I think, for sure. So one thing I want to share with everybody is, one thing we're looking to do at Compass Games is, whenever we have titles that we see are going to do quite well, for a first release. So examples would be like, some good examples I'll try to name a few, like Battle Hymn. Battle Hymn by Eric Lee Smith. We want to follow that on with a second game, and so make it a series. We got Jacobite Rising coming out now. Obviously, Combat. We have a second game for Combat with additional expansions and modules, etc. So I did share already with Brian in the last few weeks that we definitely see we're excited about the potential of the series. Simple playing games, interesting situations, fun to play. So, we've put the challenge out to Brian. The gauntlet's been thrown at Brian to come up with a second quad game on Brief Border Wars. And tell me what you told me when I said that we would like to follow it up. What was your response to me on that?
It was some variation of, way to put me on the spot, Krantz. No, it's, I think, well, I mean, it's a proven system. It's I'm satisfied with the way the system works. It's certainly shown that it's really flexible to carry on for a number of different conflicts. It would be difficult to pick another 4. I think that would be really compelling. I see some people coming up with some suggestions in the comments. I did name off the criteria that I'd like to use. I'd also like to put in another criteria, post 1945.
Okay.
I generally, or at any rate after World War I, I generally like to work in sort of the 20th or 21st century. There's an awful lot that I could have picked and chosen over, and I did put a fair amount of thought into these. I hope people will find these interesting and not too bizarre. So yeah. I would like to do another one of these. It would be easier to do because, again, we've got the proven system, we've got the core rules are down, we got the components down, and I think people will find when they get copies of this game just how flexible the system is because of all the different ways that I've managed to work in kind of the asymmetries between the combatants, both in their force mix, but also in how they have certain advantages or disadvantages that are implemented through the game's mechanics. So, yeah, why not?
Yeah, so I want to let everybody know too. So everybody has been, I think we've really been fortunate, and I've seen this sort of on the uptick since I joined Compass a little over 2 years ago, I think, that we're getting really, really strong customer support. Like if we put any request out for help, I got 20, 30 responses for proofing counter sheets for an upcoming game just in the last week. So it's amazing, and which you know how hard of a job that is. It's 5 counter sheet game, and people are like, yeah, sure, I would like to have some needles in my eyes for a few days. So it's amazing, the support we get, which helps us have a better game in the end. So I think the call to action here is, as you told me, is you wouldn't mind getting some help if people have ideas on post World War II situations that would fit this brief border wars, system and mechanics, etc. And there's probably quite a few out there. People are already trying right now their best to give you some ideas. But after this show is over and people watch the recording, it'll be great if people could just contact us, and they can contact me directly, of course, by email, or just post on Facebook or on our forum, Console World forum. But it'd be wonderful for people, if they have any ideas. Here's Nathaniel again with another one. So, just if you guys could for us, Brian's being very serious. He's like, this is a tougher assignment now to come up with 4 more. You don't have 4 at the tip of your tongue right now, Brian. Is that correct?
Actually, I've been thinking of some, but there were a couple that I had thought of. I thought of doing maybe a couple of other Latin American conflicts, like 1995. There was the Cenepa War. I actually had an idea the other day to do one on Red Vienna in 1934 to see how this system would work on showing asymmetric, irregular combat in a large city, which is a favorite topic of mine and something I'd really like to do some more work on. And then there are African conflicts as well. Nathaniel has pointed out sort of Eastern Africa ones as well. But again, I would have to think about this in terms of the criteria. Got to be a short war, definite beginning and end, and between 2 countries, and just some constraints. So,
Yeah, great. So anybody out there, please, if you have any ideas, just let us know. Don't be shy about it, because you guys have really helped us with ideas. I mean, some people have even suggested games that we've done as new editions, etc. As please do a new edition of this or that game, and we've made it happen based on customer feedback. So Mo's got another question. This is an excellent question, Mo. So this should actually probably come up earlier, and it comes up really with every game. Every game at Compass, we have sensitivity about how solo play when it's meant to be a 2-player game. We also have pure solitaire games like what Gregory M. Smith does all the time. But so yes, let's go ahead and address Mo's excellent question about solo play. Is there any hidden chits? Are there things that could get in the way? What's your response to Mo's question there, Brian?
I think they play quite well solo. As I mentioned at the beginning of a turn, each side gets a number of cards, but that's not really, it's not critical hidden information. And these games play perfectly well solo. You can just deal out the cards, the 6 cards that go to either side. And the way the game proceeds is both sides play 1 card in alternation. So, one guy will fight, the other guy might move, or maybe they both might fight, that kind of thing. But no, it's the hidden information is really minimal. And if you're playing solo, it doesn't really matter at all. And it can be quite a challenge, actually, when you're playing even solo, because as I said, you get this random hand of cards every turn, and on both sides have to do some kind of improvising.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. So that's solitaire play. Yeah. So that's good for people to know that, oh no, there's all these limited hidden things going on and it just doesn't work. So I think that's an important message. And maybe I need to check the product page. Sometimes we don't say too much about how does this work for solo play. I think it's a good idea. I got to think about that and run that up the food chain to see if maybe we need to always have a little excerpt about a 2-player or a multiplayer game by design. How is it for solitaire? Because that's what I do, solitaire all the time for games that are definitely not solitaire. Yeah,
we did do that on the product page, and I think we said medium, which tells
for the rating. Yeah, we provide a rating, but what I think people would probably appreciate, maybe you guys can tell me here on the live session, but we really don't talk about what would it be like for solitaire play. Maybe saying a little bit about it, like reassurance that there's no hidden movement or things like that, and maybe we just need to provide a little descriptor about that, just to help address some things. So another question, or actually, this was a very nice comment from Keith Powell I want to share, and I'm going to be selfish and just bring this up for a good reason. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that, Console World Expo, its 20th year is here. It was originally scheduled for now, but I want to make sure Keith and everybody knows that we did reschedule Console World Expo, and it is moving forward for August 15th through the 22nd. And we'll also be unveiling the Charles S. Roberts Awards that were resuscitated. So the 2019 Charles S. Roberts Awards will also be presented at the expo. I've been in touch with the hotel in Arizona. A lot of good updates from them this week. I haven't posted an official update for everybody yet, but things are looking still trending positive for those wanting to be together again for mid-August in Arizona. So again, thanks, Keith, for tuning in tonight and for saying you're enjoying this episode, which is really about you guys, making the episode, asking some great questions, etc. So we really appreciate that. So is there, so just some general questions for you, then I'll let you go, Brian. So as a designer, since you've done so much, has there been anything you would say that you look to that you've maybe borrowed from before, like ideas you've liked from other designers or from other game systems, in case you don't know who that designer was? I'm just curious, when you're doing so many games so quickly, are you always sort of in your own little bubble and you're just coming up with your own stuff? Or do you ever go off and reference some, like, do you play other games by other designers or other publishers? Are you playing games out there besides your own development, etc.? I'm just curious, that whole approach, are you looking at anything out there when you approach your designs? Because I know your designs are much different.
That's a really, really good question. I try not to think in a meta sense about my creativity. I tried to do that with Volko Runka a couple of years ago at a conference, and it's just it'll drive you mad if you think about your own creative process too much and what you may or may not be doing. But there are some certain points that really pick out. I like to say that I crouch on the shoulders of giants. There's very few things that are completely new and completely, that come out of nowhere and are completely new and innovative in our hobby. My favorite designers are, of course, some of the crazy stuff that James Dunnigan did. And Joe Miranda has done some incredibly creative work. There are some newer designers who are really good at working in the kind of area of asymmetry and chaos that I like to work in. Cole Verla, for example, with Root and Pax Pamir, games like that. He is just a brilliant guy. I'd say a willingness to experiment. A willingness to grab things out of the past. Sometimes they're obscure and way in the past, but to grab something out and try something new with it. And to take it and to twist it and make something new of your own. But acknowledge your intellectual debts. Don't be afraid to drop names. Don't be afraid to name check, because that's the decent thing to do. Nobody works completely in their own little bubble. I will say, though, that I design. I spend a lot more of my time designing than I do playing, and I'm not sure if that is if that is always a good thing. But I only have so much time available in the day to do this, and so I kind of spend it on this.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you, I think we're at the final call here. Let me see. There is a question from Nathaniel that I may have missed earlier. So let's take this question from Nathaniel. And again, somebody else may have asked it. Repeating Dan's question. Yes, from No Enemies Here. What Canadian subject should be covered in a game? I like this. I like this all Canadian focus. This is like at Expo in Arizona. We have the Canadians. I love that camaraderie. That's very cool.
I am really sorry I won't be able to come down this year, John.
That's okay. It's okay. I know with international restrictions, I know that already. It's I don't see that loosening up in August, so I get it. I
have been to so many Console World Expos, I've lost count. I have T-shirts from the cons that are so old that my wife's thrown them away.
Scary.
And meeting you is always
Oh, thanks. It's great to see you with your 30 designs that you offer up on the little in the foyer area.
Yep.
Hi, I'm Brian Train. I have 30 designs here. Would you like to play test with me? Yeah, pick your battle.
Yeah.
That's sort of how it works with you. You have all these great ideas all the time, and people appreciate it. They can just do pickup games with you, and you can get your work further along. So that's great.
Well, I love meeting people at this thing and showing them, unusual things. But a Canadian subject that should be covered. Again,
we did Prelude to Revolution. It's I don't know if you're probably familiar with Canadian history there, obviously. So I don't know if you've seen that game before. That's our big contribution to Canada. I think we've done some others as well to cover that area as well, obviously. But that was our big one, Prelude to Revolution.
Yeah. Well, I like to work in 20th century or 21st century. So maybe I could. I don't know, maybe, one game I have been working on for a while is a revised edition of Civil Power, which is a tactical game I've done on kind of a tactical generic game on urban disorders, riots, and mobs and things like that.
I don't know what you mean by riots. What are riots? I mean, can you explain further? And I apologize. I may have said Prelude to Revolution.
Far away.
Yeah, I may have said Prelude to Revolution by accident. That's because we have something in the works that has that title that's going to be announced soon. Prelude to Rebellion, of course, is the Canadian game I was wishing to mention. But mobs, okay. I'm down with mobs.
So maybe I'll write a scenario for the Winnipeg General Strike of 1920.
Oh, there you go. Well, you will do that, not me. But here's one: townsfolk of Niagara invading Canada.
Army camp once.
We have some creative people out there. Looks like if I leave you in a room with these guys right here, you're going to get some good ideas. So, hey, I just want to take a moment. I hope I asked some good questions. I know everybody did a great job. All pressure is off me because I can just rely on this audience who does just a great job. Every session we get some great questions, and I think we give you some challenging questions too that made you think a little bit. We had one question we stumped you on about what's that one obscure conflict you haven't done yet. So I think our audience delivered again tonight. So I just want to take this moment, Brian. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for partnering with Compass on this new exciting release that will be coming up very shortly. I want to wish you all the best with all your other publishing efforts. You have a lot of games in the pipeline with various publishers, and we just love, we wish you continued success. And we hope we can come up. Sounds like you have some ideas already for those next 4. So I'll keep you honest on that, and maybe I'll get some support from my online friends here to help work on that further. So again, I just want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was a great episode, and we know a lot more about you. Man, that's the most important thing, know more about you, but we also know a little bit now about Brief Border Wars. That will be available for 5 days before we stop, right? Briefly.
Yep. I suppose you could build a fort with the unsold copies.
Well, again, Brian, thank you so much.
It's great working with you guys. And I want to give a shout out to Mark Mahaffey. He was a really good artist to work with on this. He did a good job on the maps and counters. I'm very pleased. Yes, absolutely. It's really important to mention it's a team effort at Compass, and Mark did a spectacular job. We definitely want to thank him. So again, I want to thank you very much, Brian, for your time today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Please look for us next week. I think we're looking at perhaps next Thursday for our first episode of Behind the Scenes at Compass Games, which will be just myself joined by Bill Thomas, the owner of Compass Games, to take all your questions. Any questions you have at all, we'll be looking to answer them. But again, thank you so much for spending some time with us on this Friday evening. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope you're excited about Brief Border Wars. And again, thank you again for being here. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.